In today's clip, I'd like to just review one of the dumbest articles I've read about the post-pandemic working world, right? Mostly because I feel like its points hinge on the incredibly obvious to the downright naive. Let's go, cynicism. Hey, XenPuck here. Another day not working for any reason except to satisfy my own ego as a productive member of society. So I've been harping on this for a while, that the pandemic will change utterly nothing about the workplace, or much of anything, because people are dumb and have short memories and just follow the herd and yada yada yada. And lo and behold, we're getting out of the worst of the pandemic times, and already this lovely article came across my desk, and I just had to react to it, right? Here's its title. Bosses are acting like the pandemic never happened. The pandemic transformed work. A lot of employers haven't caught up. I'll link the article in the description below, okay? Right off the bat, the title and headline crack me up. Did the pandemic transform work? Yes, in fact it did, because that had to happen, or else no kind of job could be done at all, right? But this is situational only for when COVID is in full swing. Of course employers won't catch up. Catch up to what? It's not like the changes to remote work was anything but a nuisance to employers, right? So of course the first and only options for employers the moment the pandemic ebbs is simply to go back to normal, the traditional way, the way the things were being done, because it was working fine. And the changes that happened during the pandemic was the aberration, right? Not the new normal. Why would any employer or boss want to make changes when the last year was absolutely brutal for most businesses? Does that make any sense? If you, as a company or boss, makes less money during a year for whatever reason, guess what you're not going to want to replicate the next year? You'd not want to replicate the same circumstances that brought you less money, right? Oh my god. So to me, it is completely logical for people in charge to want to forget about 2020, or even the first part of 2021, as quickly as possible, right? Anyway, so I read the rest of the article, and my goodness, it's just filled with so many idiotic statements that sounds kind of reasonable, but I'm going to pick a bunch of quotes that I'm going to, then refute. Right? Number one, some bosses, especially in white-collar industries, became more understanding of childcare responsibilities, granting employees the flexibility to do their work outside the traditional 9-to-5, even if they didn't necessarily reduce the overall workload. End quote. First of all, if you work somewhere where bosses only care about you working 9-to-5, you must feel very lucky, right? What's a 9-to-5? Does that still exist in white-collar jobs in this time and space? Do your bosses kick you out right at 5 p.m.? I've never had that happen to me, right? So bosses has never minded if you work overtime. They just don't want you to pay for it. Am I right? Okay, so working from home just means that the employer couldn't quite keep track of when you're actually working. So two things wrong with the sentence. Number one, no, the bosses didn't give you anything. They just expected you to do the work that you're being paid to do, right? To say that they granted employees flexibility to work different hours is BS, okay? Makes the bosses sound like real humanitarians or something. What? They wouldn't be able to tell whether you were working anyway. So that's not a boon, that's just something that they had to accept, not that they were happy to give, right? And number two, oh, the bosses didn't reduce their workload. Why is that a surprise that needed to be stated, right? You still have the same job, right? Why the heck would any boss reduce anyone's workload when there's a pandemic going on and workers have little chances of changing jobs at all, right? Normally, the only leverage any employee has at any given moment is the threat of leaving for a better job, right? And when that's basically gone during a global crisis like the pandemic, employees are basically at the mercy of their employer even more than usual. So what? Just because someone's individual life is tougher during the pandemic doesn't mean anything to a company, right? So to expect surprise that there wasn't this reduction in work is just plain stupid. Okay. The second quote. Meanwhile, some larger employers are ready to get rid of the flexibility of the pandemic in order to bring all their employees back to the office. The commute, yes, people don't like the commute, but so what? JP Morgan Chase's chief executive Jamie Dimon said at a May conference, end quote. Oh man, guess what? I'm right again. Of course I'm right, because I know companies Nobody likes commuting, but everybody likes being employed and paid, right? So it should be zero surprise that companies want to go back to the setup that they had before the pandemic. The pandemic changed nothing fundamental about how lazy most people are. Even in the office, do you know how much time people spend goofing off? Trust me, I did it, and I did it pretty openly too. But it's 10 times worse at home. Did it really take a quote from a major banking chief to drive this point home? Right. Okay. Here's my example. Surely any of you who's ever worked in an office has wondered about a coworker as to what the heck this guy or gal even does all day long. Now, if you felt that way about someone while you're in the office, just imagine the amount of naps that guy's taking during the past year. Yeah, it's bad. And companies have to treat most employees like children because that's what a lot of people act like. Obviously, I'm not saying all employees or all people are like children, but there's a significant percentage of people who only produce out of the fear of losing their jobs, and being back in the sterile embrace of the company office will rectify this past year of crap productivity and output. Quote number 3. When the pandemic hit, workers were forced to take on health risks many of them never thought they'd face on the job, and many say their employers were slow to protect them. Oh my god, where do I start with this one? Okay, first of all, let me be clear. I think that employers should protect their employees when the circumstances are of the employer's creation, right? Here's a really easy example, right? Amazon warehouses had a bunch of accidents due to, bear repellents, canister of bear repellents being punctured by moving robots, and that hurt the employees via inhalation, right? That is totally unacceptable, and Amazon presumably have put in some additional measures to make sure such things can't happen again, right? They are responsible because they're the ones that allowed harmful chemicals to humans to be stored in the same areas as their human workers. However, this quote was talking about, if you're an essential worker, whether your supermarket employer should be giving you PPEs. To me, not providing PPEs to employees wouldn't actually count as employers' core responsibility because they didn't create the pandemic, right? When we had the pandemic, everyone in the world needed PPEs. So you could argue that it's the individuals or your local government's responsibility to provide the PPE, right? But not specifically the employers. Now, I'm not saying that a good employer shouldn't want to provide PPEs just to be extrally accommodating, right? I'm just saying that it shouldn't be viewed as a requirement. If public health problems were part of your employer's responsibilities, why wouldn't they say, also pay for your car insurance since most people have to drive to go to work, right? Oh, by the way, workers are not forced to take on health risks at their jobs, even if they're essential workers, because we don't live in a dictatorship, right? Everyone has a choice to simply leave their job, okay? Don't live in a dictatorship where you're not allowed to change your jobs. Because if that was the case, then the place of work absolutely has all these responsibilities to keep you upright and healthy, if only out of the selfish reasons to make sure that you're still, actually working. Quote number 4. Some restaurant owners counter that with their low profit margins, they can't afford to raise wages. But the whole debate seems somewhat anachronistic, with employers trying to get workers to accept the same pay they were getting before the pandemic, or only a slight increase, as though the last year didn't change everything about their jobs. Okay. Again, I want to make it clear on the worker shortage issue, right? While I agree that employers absolutely can simply raise wages to attract better workers or more workers, I did not expect them to raise wages to start when they're opening back up. Again, the idea that last year changed everything is complete and utterly BS, right? But last year changed things only because the world was in a different mental space, as everybody was afraid to simply go outside and do social things. That's coming to an end, by the way. Employers would have always started off with the same crappy pay at the type of job, low skill kind of jobs that we're now calling essential work. It's low skill, low labor, low skill, high labor jobs, right? Now, over time, either they raise wages or they'd be short on workers and they would die. Their businesses would die. So wages will rise. However, I don't want to sound like I'm only on the boss's side, right? I'm not. All employers could simply raise wages and also raise prices. So workers will be happy for a very short amount of time, at least they themselves, until they themselves want to go out to eat, right? Because these are restaurant workers we're talking about. Higher wages will simply be passed to the consumer. So in the end, the issue I have with this kind of statement is that it seems to be implying that higher wages is deserved simply because some airborne disease happened, right? And but not because the employee has somehow learned some new skills or contribute at a more productive level. So in absolute terms, yes, wages most likely will increase because people seems to only understand increases in the absolute amount that they're getting, but not parity in purchasing power, right? So new higher wages will only contribute to inflation, and purchasing power will likely barely keep par, if even that, with a slightly higher pay. So awesome, you got what you wanted? Really? Still makes no sense to me why you would want inflated pay that really buys you nothing more. Okay. Now, final last quote. Oh man. But an attachment to in-office work could actually end up hurting companies. CEOs should be thinking, if I push my organization back to 2019 and that all cubicle model, the risk is that I'm going to lose my best employees, end quote. What? What another crock of shit. Okay. Jesus Christ. Like, I don't know who wrote this. I don't think this is the writer. I think she's quoting somebody here. Your best employees will want to be where the action is. Your best employee will never ever be able to have the same impact remote, okay? Once again, I just want to point out that teleconferencing is not a new technology for the last year. It's been around for more than a decade and has already been tried organically, not because of a global health crisis either, and by big companies too. And they couldn't make it work during normal circumstances. The best employees for the companies are the ones asking for maximum flexibility. The best employees in the company are the ones that adopt to the company's culture, not the other way around, right? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the best employees are the best human beings. I think the best employees are often actually quite terrible human beings because I was one of those people who could literally and did devote most of my waking hours and even some of my sleep to do more work. But that made me a crappy friend and a crappy family member, okay? So that's the trade-off. So there's a real reason why companies want everything to go back to the way it was, because that's what's good for the company, not for the employees individually. Oh, man. Look, at the end of the day, I'm so tired of being right, all right? In the end, what would be perfect for the employees is just not the same as what would be for a company. I mean, I live the ideal employee life right now. And you know what that is? It's simply not being an employee at all. I have perfect flexibility and just as much income as I need. But that took years and years of sacrifice, okay? This is not something that most people are capable of achieving, so to expect any employer to be helpful in that aspect, oh man, what are you guys smoking to believe that, okay? Anyway, did you guys get as frustrated or somewhat giggly as well as you read this article? I know I did, and it's definitely a weird combination of feelings. Anyway, I'm done now. Comment, like, subscribe, and share, all that boring jazz. Cheers.